face each other in the Final Four, and then tomorrow they finish it up. Again, the Monday, Tuesday for the Elite Eight this year. We'll get back to that. Meanwhile, let's get to what happened on Friday. It was nuts. The Niners setting the trade frenzy in motion as they moved up, sending the 12th pick overall, plus 2 additional firsts and a third to the Dolphins for the number 3 pick in this year's draft. Miami continued the wheeling and dealing. They took that 12th pick, they packaged it together with some other moves, and went up to get the Eagles pick at number 6. So Miami is now 6 overall. The Eagles are at 12. They could have as many as 3 first-round picks in next year's draft, depending on the compensation for Carson Wentz. That'll turn out based upon how much he plays this year. One way or another, it was nuts. And here's the current draft order of the top 15 picks. Remember, Mel Kiper, in his latest mock, had 4 quarterbacks going in the top 4. And the assumption is that remains the same, with San Francisco making the move up there to get the 3rd pick. So now that we have had the weekend to digest all of this, I turn to our quarterback, Dan Orlovsky. What is the number one most important thought you have coming out of those huge trades on Friday?
Yeah, San Francisco went up to go get either Mac Jones or Trey Lance. I think the reality is that Kyle Shanahan, their head coach, probably loves Mac Jones, and the organization is very much so intrigued by Trey Lance. If we think about Kyle Shanahan, I played underneath him, and the 2 of the things that he used to stress all the time that he loved physically when it came to a quarterback was, 1, a natural throwing motion, and then 2, this upper body torque to be able to throw when your feet aren't perfect. 2 quarterbacks at the top of this draft have those 2 physical traits. 1, Zach Wilson, and 2, Mac Jones. It's a perfect fit for Mac Jones to go in and play really well. And I also think that this organization has some intrigue with a guy, Trey Lance, that has almost unlimited physical traits.
I like what you're saying there, but I think that Kyle Shanahan has probably learned some things since you were under him, and those things were taught to him by probably Patrick Mahomes and also Jimmy Garoppolo. So, I think those things changed. What he saw Patrick Mahomes being able to do might lead him to look at somebody like Trey Lance, and the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo kind of stayed injured might lead him to look at somebody like Justin Fields. I think that maybe his opinion of quarterback and what he's looking for a quarterback always been athleticism. Going back to his father, he's always wanted, all the way back to John Elway, an athletic quarterback who can move, which, that leads me to look more at Justin Fields, a tough guy who can take a shot in the ribs and still throw a million touchdowns in a championship game. Given what happened with Jimmy the last couple of years, I could see them looking at him, and given what happened to them in the Super Bowl, I could see them looking at a guy like Trey Lance and trying to recreate what they did in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes.
It does feel like those will be the 3 quarterbacks that'll be options for them. Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson figured to be off the board. So going up to 3, you're looking at Justin Fields, Trey Lance, and Mac Jones. And Mike Tannenbaum, you have sneaky big news that might give us a hint as to which way they're leaning.
So, Greeny, tomorrow there's a pro day at both Alabama and reportedly both John Lynch, the general manager of the 49ers, and Kyle Shanahan are going to be in Tuscaloosa to watch Mac Jones throw instead of Justin Fields at Ohio State. And again, that's not necessarily outcome determinative, but I think it's a very strong signal of which way they're leaning. And I do agree with Dan that Mac Jones is a perfect fit with Kyle Shanahan. And one thing that I think bears noting here, which is I have sat in that seat for 2 different teams. I think it's unbelievable to trade up 2 1s and a 3 for a quarterback in Trey Lance that started 1 game this year. I love Trey Lance. I think he has a chance to be really special. But you talking about a risk and putting all your chips in the middle of the table, I think it's inconceivable that they would trade up so much draft capital for a quarterback that started 1 game.
Sure. I want to make sure everyone understands that circumstance. He started 1 game because his team basically opted out of the season, then created a 1-game season in order to give him a showcase. So it wasn't his fault that he only played 1-game season, but the fact remains. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I think but that's the reality is they realized that Kyle Shanahan loves Mac Jones and wants to go get Mac Jones, while there's still some within their building that are very much so intrigued by the talent, the long-term talent of Trey Lance. And so going to 3, it confirms that they're going to get either of those guys, and they still have 4 or so weeks to figure it out. I do want to attack this point, though, Greeny, because everyone continues to talk about Mac Jones and his lack of athleticism like it's an elderly person on the football field. 2 out of the last 4 Super Bowls Kyle Shanahan has been in. He's done so with Matt Ryan, and he's done so with Jimmy Garoppolo. Matt Ryan ran 4.89. Jimmy Garoppolo ran 4.97. Mac Jones ran 4.83. Technically, at least straight line-wise, Mac Jones is a better athlete than both of the quarterbacks that have gone to the Super Bowl with Kyle Shanahan recently.
I don't know if we have enough time to get into all the topics that this presents, but okay, he's just as athletic as Jimmy Garoppolo and Matt Ryan. Let's be clear that there's a different level of athleticism. We're talking about Fields or Lance. So that's the only point that I think people are making. No one's saying that Mac Jones is not an athlete. And the other Mac Jones point that I'd like to combat a little bit, that there's this belief that Mac Jones is the most sure thing because he's so experienced and he's done so much. He's played one season. It was an incredible season.
I agree.
But let's not pretend that Mac Jones is a 3-year starter that's dominated all 3 years, and that Mac Jones is a sure kind of translation to the next level. So we keep framing Mac Jones in part because I think he stepped in for Tua and he's in Alabama. We're framing Mac Jones as the kind of low risk or high floor, low ceiling guy. I'm not so sure that we can say that off of one season of football when everyone was kind of in shambles because of the coronavirus. We still have to understand that Mac Jones is no more sure thing than anybody else on this roster. Maybe Trey Lance, because Trey Lance played one game this last year and played in a conference that didn't have much talent.
But he played in a full season the year before, and Mac Jones did not. Mac Jones took over when Tua got hurt. They've actually started a very similar number of games, but Jones did it at Alabama and won a national championship, and Trey Lance did it at North Dakota State, and that is what it is. Meanwhile, I think it is important to bring in, well, I want to get Kimberly in here, so let me work the Eagles into this, but there's so much more in this that we can obviously continue to work through. But the other team that was involved in these trades, of course, was the Eagles. They're the ones who moved themselves out of that very top echelon in the draft. And the AP reporter for the Eagles, Rob Maaddi, put out a tweet shedding light on the quarterback situation there, tweeting, "The Eagles are unsure about Jalen Hurts. No consensus in the building. After beating the Saints, they wanted to get rid of Carson Wentz. After next 3 losses, they want to work it out with Carson. After trading Carson, they considered a trade up for a QB before trading down to 12. So it sounds like they're kind of all over the place, and candidly, if you've paid attention to the way they've gone about things, that seems consistent with the way the inconsistency has been there. So, Kimberly, let me bring you in on all of this. What does this mean in Philly? We see all the stuff with San Francisco. We see all the stuff with Miami. They position themselves to get a great weapon for Tua Tagovailoa. What exactly is Philadelphia doing?
Greeny, if you know, let me know. Listen, they've at least shown by moving back that they're going to try to fill the roster with some talent and keep Jalen Hurts. But if you look at all the moves they've made recently, it's hard to figure out what exactly the Eagles want to do and what direction they want to go, because they originally loved Carson Wentz and gave him a ton of money. And then finally they were done with Carson and shipped him off. And now it's the Jalen show. We think, because he's only started 4 games, we still don't know what Jalen Hurts is. A lot of potential, but he needs this season to figure out, for the Eagles to figure out what they have, and the Eagles have to at least build around him for the time being.
Well, Dan Orlovsky, I feel like they did what you were recommending last week that they do, which is give Hurts a shot for the season. Sure. They bring in a seasoned backup in Joe Flacco, who, that he figures to play that role nicely. And now they trade back out of 6. They start stockpiling picks, and they start rebuilding the team. That was verbatim what you said last week you thought they should do.
Yeah, 100%, Greeny. But I also think what transpired Friday puts them into the Russell Wilson conversation for the now and the future. Okay, this is a bad football team, so I like the fact that they're not making panic decisions. But the reality is they now have a young quarterback, Jalen Hurts, and probably 4 first-round picks over the next 2 seasons, this year and next year. So and we know that they've sniffed around Deshaun Watson. If you have sniffed around Deshaun Watson, you for sure better be sniffing around Russell Wilson. And now this at least gives Philadelphia 2 options. They can, 1, figure out what they have in Jalen Hurts. I've said that for weeks now. Or 2, they can go, we've got Jalen Hurts to Seattle. And you could take our 4 first-round picks over the next 2 years and give us Russell Wilson if he's willing to come to our organization.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. Nick, what do you see from this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like they probably were willing to move up if they thought they could get a franchise changer, and then when they realized they couldn't, then they were like, let's scrap it and rebuild this team, which I agree with Dan is the right way to go. But what happened to my man Sudfeld? I thought they were giving him some reps at the end of the year to see what they have. Is he out of the conversation? Is Nate Sudfeld out of the conversation? Bring in Nate.
Here you go.
They wanted to see what they had in Nate Sudfeld at the end of the year. But you know what? At the end of the day, this tanking they did, it kind of worked in their favor right there. They were sitting at 6. That's
only if they make the picks well, Greeny. We know what the draft pick selection history has been over the past couple years. So only if you hit on the picks does it pay off.
That's a whole other problem. That's 100% right. All right, we're just getting started. Look, it's going to be nuts today. Put your feet up. We got a phenomenal show. We still haven't gotten to this. Bruce Arians with a stern warning